In this lesson, we will learn how to create a dynamic parenting system. Now remember in level 1, we parented our eye control to our head control. And we saw the limitation of that. We can't have the eyes target. Now it'd be nice if we can provide animators with more control, if we can create a switch to turn this parenting system on and off. So that's what we're going to set up in this lesson. Let's first set up our custom channel, and we'll have that added to the eye control. That's why it's very clear where to find this switch. So with the control selected, we'll head over to Modify and choose Add Attribute. We'll start with a displayable channel, and we can name this Driver. Let's go ahead and choose Add. And now, the animatable channel, we'll go ahead and name that Follow Head. Let's go ahead and set the minimum to 0 and the max to 1. So when we're at 0, the head will have no control over the eyes. Once this is set to 1, that's when the control will start to drive the eyes. Alright, great. So from here, we're ready to choose OK. Next, let's go ahead and create a group above our eye control. The reason being is because we're going to use a constraint to lock the eyes to our head control. And what we don't want is for the constraint to be applied directly to the eye control. Otherwise, we'll have to animate on top of our constraints, and that can get kind of messy. It is possible, but it gets a little messy. So what we'll do is go ahead and simply group the eyes. Let's head over to Edit and take a look at our grouping tool. We'll go to the options, and I'll just make sure our settings are reset. So we have a few options here. Remember when we use Control G, how the pivot of that group is automatically at the origin? Well, that's because of our options here. So if we want, we can have the group's pivot centered to the object that we're grouping. So let's go ahead and choose Center. Now, when we choose Group, and we grab our Move tool, you'll see that the group's pivot is right there at the eyes. Alright, perfect. So once this is done, let's go ahead and take a look at our outliner. I'll go ahead and press the F key with the group selected. We're going to want to take this group and parent it underneath the controls group. So it still follows our global control, but remember, we want the ability to turn the parenting system on and off, so we no longer want this group parented underneath our head control. I'd like to point out another option in our group tool. If we were to go to the option box, you could see that we can choose where that group gets parented. So you can see exactly why the eye control is still parented underneath the head control. It's because of this group under mode. If we had it set to world, it would not be grouped under anything. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now we do still want it underneath our hierarchy here, but not underneath the head control. So with the group selected, we'll go ahead and control click our controls group and press the P key. Alright, great. Let's go ahead and rename this group to something more clear. That's going to be GRP CNS for group constraint, since our constraint is going to be attached to this. And then following that, we'll use the name of the control object so we know what it's a part of. So that's going to be anim_eyes01. Alright, great. So when we grab our head control and we start to move that around, you'll see that the eyes are able to now target. Alright, very nice. Okay, so next we need to go ahead and set up a constraint to get this all tied down. So we could always work with a parent constraint. Let's go ahead and set this up. We'll grab our head control, and now let's go ahead and control click our group. We'll go to Constraint, and we'll head over to our parent constraint options. We can go ahead and work with the default settings. That's just fine. And we can actually work with Maintain Offset. It's not going to be a big deal. The only difference between the two in this case is the translation space. So if we were to go ahead and turn off Maintain Offset and choose Apply, you'll see that the eyes are going to snap to the exact pivot point of our head control, and we don't want that. And at this point, there's no real reason to set up a locator. It's not needed. It's primarily for our joint objects that we want to clean up. So what we can do here is make sure maintain offset is on, and we'll choose add. All right, very nice. So we now have our constraint applied. When we grab our head control and we start to move it around, you can see that there's still an influence here because our control object is purple. Now watch this. If we were to go to that group, let's go ahead and find it. Here it is. If we were to now go to our constraint and set its weight to 0, you'll see that when we start to move our head control, the eyes will no longer follow. So this is exactly what we want. Now, we could always work with the connection editor to finish up here to tie directly into this weight. But since we're not weighting against anything, what's going to happen is when we switch between 0 and 1, we're not going to get a smooth transition. Now, if we had this weighted against another object, then we can have a smooth transition as we blend back and forth from 0 to 1. But again, since there's no extra weight here to weight against, we'd have a snap. But there is a way around this. Let me go ahead and show you how. What we can do is simply go ahead and add keyframes on top of our translate and rotate channels, all channels that have been locked down by the parent constraint. Now, before we do that, let's go ahead and take a look at our settings. So I'll go ahead and open up our animation preferences. And from here, we're going to take a look at our animation preferences. You'll see that by default, Maya has this set to always blend with existing connections. This is what allows us to get a nice blend between the constraint and our keyframe animation. So when we go ahead and create keys, we'll be given a blend node that we could use to blend back and forth. So this is exactly what we need here. Let's make sure that this first option is checked, and it should be by default, so you should have no problems. All right, so now with our group selected that has the constraint, we can now press Shift-W and Shift-E to create, translate, and rotate keys. Very important, we need to key all channels that the constraint has been applied to for blending to work in both position and orientation. So take a look, we now have this blend parent channel that has been made. Very nice. And you could also see that Maya's created a pair blend node in order for the blending to work. All right, so what we could do now is tie our attribute into this blend parent attribute. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We'll head over to Window, General Editors, and we will grab the connection editor. With our group selected, let's go ahead and load that on our input side, the right side. Now, let's go ahead and grab our eye control that has the custom channel, and let's go ahead and load that on the left side. We can now go ahead and take follow head and then tie that into blend parent. All right, super cool. So watch this. When we go ahead and start testing this out, you'll see that right now our follow head switch is set to 0, meaning the eyes will not follow. But once we start to reorient the head, watch this. Now we can go to our eye control. We can go and grab our follow head channel, and we could start to now blend. Take a look at that. As we start to drag with the middle mouse button, we're able to get a nice blend back and forth. There we have it. So we have learned how to create a dynamic parenting system. Super cool and very flexible. Provides animators with more choices. So now that we have an idea of how to set up a dynamic parent switching feature, let's go ahead and take a look at a way we can work with multiple parents in the next lesson.